The crimson suns of Veloria cast long shadows across the battlefield as Corporal Jake Morrison picked his way through the twisted wreckage of what had once been a diplomatic convoy. His boots crunched on crystallized sand, each step sending tiny prisms of light scattering in the fading daylight. The acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone filled his respirator, but he pressed forward, following the faint distress beacon that had been pinging for the last 6 hours. Jake wasn't supposed to be here. His patrol had been reassigned to the northern sector after reports of rebel activity, but something about that beacon wouldn't let him ignore it. Maybe it was the irregular pattern, not the standard military frequency, but something softer, almost musical in its rhythm. Or maybe it was the way his chest had tightened when he first heard it, as if his heart recognized a melody it had never learned. The convoy had taken a direct hit from plasma artillery. 3 vehicles lay scattered like discarded toys, their elegant curves now jagged sculptures of destruction. These weren't human transports. The biometallic hulls and crystalline viewports belonged to the Zeridian Empire, humanity's reluctant allies in this seemingly endless war. Jake had seen plenty of their technology before, but never this close, never this personal dot. He approached the largest wreckage carefully, weapon lowered but ready. The Zeridians were humanoid in appearance, but their strength and speed far exceeded human capabilities. An injured one could still be dangerous, especially if they felt cornered. The beacon grew stronger as he circled the overturned transport, its haunting pulse now almost synchronous with his heartbeat. A soft whimper stopped him cold. Jake froze, listening. The sound came again, definitely not mechanical, and definitely young. He holstered his rifle and pulled out his plasma cutter, working quickly to slice through the warped hatch. The metal peeled back like flower petals, revealing the darkened interior. "Hello?" he called softly in Galactic Standard. "Is anyone in there?" A pair of luminous violet eyes peered out from behind a piece of fallen debris. They were large and expressive, set in a face that was unmistakably Zeridian, delicate features with the characteristic silver-blue skin and elegant pointed ears. But this wasn't a warrior or diplomat. This was a child, no more than 10 standard years old, clutching what appeared to be a small, iridescent creature that purred like a contented cat. "Don't hurt Shimmer," she whispered, her voice carrying the melodic quality common to her species. "He's scared." Jake's heart did something strange in his chest. He'd seen plenty of casualties in this war, human and alien alike. But something about this child's protective instinct toward her pet touched him in a way that had nothing to do with military training or diplomatic relations. "I won't hurt anyone," he said, slowly removing his helmet to show his face. "My name is Jake. What's yours?" She studied him with those remarkable eyes, head tilted slightly. "I'm Naya," she said finally. "You're human. Guilty as charged." Jake smiled, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "Are you hurt, Naya?" She shook her head, though Jake could see a thin line of silver blood, Zeridian blood, trickling from a cut on her forehead. "I'm not supposed to talk to humans. Mother says you single quotes complicated." "She's probably right about that," Jake chuckled, then grew serious as explosions rumbled in the distance. "But right now, I'm the only one here, and this place isn't safe. Will you let me help you?" Naya looked down at her pet, whispering something in the flowing Zeridian language. The creature, Shimmer, chirped once and nodded its tiny head. She looked back at Jake with sudden determination. "Shimmer says you have kind eyes. Zeridian eyes lie, but human eyes tell truth. Is that right?" Jake felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he'd never experienced before. "I hope so. I promise I'll keep both of you safe." She stood carefully. Shimmer nestled in the crook of her arm, and Jake was struck by her natural grace despite her obvious fear. Even as a child, she carried herself with an innate dignity that spoke of noble breeding. This wasn't just any Zeridian child. The intricate silver circlet woven through her dark hair and the quality of her clothing suggested royal blood. "Princess," he said, understanding flooding through him. "You're Princess Naya." Her eyes widened in surprise. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess." Jake held out his hand. "Your Highness, we need to leave now." She looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment, then placed her small fingers in his. Her skin was warm, warmer than he'd expected, and he could feel a faint electric tingle where they touched, probably some kind of bioelectric field common to her species. They had barely cleared the wreckage when the first wave of fighters screamed overhead, their engines drowning out all other sound. Jake pulled Naya behind a cluster of crystallized rocks, just as plasma bolts began raining down around them. The attackers weren't targeting them specifically. They were sanitizing the crash site, eliminating any evidence or survivors. "Stay down," Jake whispered, wrapping his arms around both Naya and Shimmer as debris showered around them. "Don't move until I say." Naya pressed against him, trembling. "Are they trying to kill us?" "They're trying to clean up loose ends." Jake's jaw tightened. "But they'll have to go through me first." The attack lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. When the fighters finally moved on, Jake waited another 10 minutes before cautiously raising his head. The landscape around them had been transformed into a field of glass and twisted metal. Nothing could have survived that bombardment. Nothing except the three of them, hidden in their improvised shelter. "Is it over?" Naya whispered. "For now." Jake helped her to her feet, checking quickly for injuries. A few minor cuts and bruises, nothing serious. "We need to get to the extraction point." "Can you walk?" She nodded bravely, though Jake could see exhaustion in her eyes. He activated his emergency beacon and checked his coordinates. The rendezvous was 8 kilometers away through hostile territory. Under normal circumstances, it would be a difficult but manageable trek. Carrying a traumatized child and her pet through active combat zones changed the equation significantly. "Naya," he said gently, kneeling to her eye level. "This is going to be a long walk, and it might get dangerous. I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" She looked into his eyes for a long moment, her hand absently stroking Shimmer's scales. "Mother always said humans make promises they can't keep. But Shimmer likes you, and he's never wrong about people. Smart pet." Jake smiled. "Then let's go home." They set out across the devastated landscape as the twin suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Jake moved carefully, using his scanner to avoid patrol routes and energy signatures. Naya walked beside him without complaint, though he could see her growing tiredness in the way she occasionally stumbled on the uneven ground. After 2 hours, she finally stopped, swaying slightly on her feet. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't go any further." Jake knelt beside her, concerned. "Hey, you've been incredibly brave. No one expects you to walk all night. Royal blood should be stronger," she said, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Mother would be ashamed." "Your mother would be proud," Jake said firmly. "You survived a crash, an airstrike, and you've walked 8 kilometers without a single complaint. That's not weakness, that's strength." He looked around, assessing their situation. They were in a valley between 2 ridges, relatively sheltered but still exposed. The extraction point was still 4 kilometers away, and Naya was clearly at her limit. "Climb on," he said, turning his back to her. "What?" "Piggyback ride." "Unless royal protocol forbids it?" For the first time since he'd found her, Naya smiled, a radiant expression that transformed her entire face. "I don't think there are rules about human transportation methods." She climbed onto his back, Shimmer perched on her shoulder, and Jake stood carefully. She was lighter than he'd expected, though he could feel the subtle alien bone density that gave her species their superior strength. Her arms around his neck were warm, and he caught a faint scent like starflowers and ozone dot. They traveled in comfortable silence for a while, Jake's enhanced vision helping him navigate the rocky terrain. Occasionally, Naya would whisper directions or point out obstacles he might have missed. Despite their different species, they worked together with surprising harmony. "Jake?" she said softly as they crested a hill. "Yeah? Why did you save me?" "Humans and Ziridians, we're not friends." Jake considered the question carefully. Maybe we should be. Maybe the war has made us forget that we're not really that different. Different species, different worlds, different everything, she pointed out. Different doesn't mean incompatible. He adjusted his grip on her legs, making sure she was secure. "Look at you and Shimmer. You're nothing alike, but you're best friends." She giggled, a sound like silver bells. "Shimmer isn't a person, isn't he? He understands you, cares about you, makes decisions. Sounds like a person to me, just a different kind." Naya was quiet for several minutes, thinking. "You're strange, Jake Morrison. I'll take that as a compliment." The extraction point was a clearing marked by tall crystalline formations that glowed faintly in the darkness. Jake's transport was already waiting, a sleek human vessel that looked crude next to Ziridian technology, but was reliable and fast. The pilot, Sergeant Torres, stepped out as they approached. "Morrison, where the hell have you been?" "And what is that?" "Diplomatic cargo," Jake said carefully, helping Naya down from his back. "VIP, transport to the nearest Ziridian outpost." Torres looked skeptical, but didn't argue. Jake had a reputation for finding strays, and military protocol was flexible in active war zones. "Fine, but if this causes an interstellar incident, it's on you." As they prepared to board, Naya caught Jake's hand. "Will I see you again?" The question hit him harder than he'd expected. In a few hours, she'd be back with her people, and he'd return to his unit. The war would continue, and their paths would likely never cross again. But something in her eyes made him want to make promises he couldn't keep. "I hope so," he said honestly. She smiled, reached up on her tiptoes, and kissed his cheek, a gentle, innocent gesture that somehow felt like the most important moment of his life. "Thank you, Jake Morrison," she whispered, "for everything." As the transport lifted off, carrying Princess Naya back to safety, Jake touched the spot on his cheek where her lips had brushed his skin. He didn't know it yet, but that single moment would change the course of his life, her life, and perhaps even the fate of two worlds. The war between humans and Ziridians would continue, but something new had been planted that night, a seed of hope that would grow in the most unexpected of hearts. 3 years had passed since that fateful night on Veloria, and Princess Naya had grown from a frightened child into a radiant young woman. At 20 standard years, she possessed all the ethereal beauty of her species. Luminous violet eyes that seemed to hold the mysteries of distant stars, skin like polished moonstone with the faintest silver undertone, and the characteristic pointed ears that now held delicate crystalline jewelry that chimed softly when she moved. Her dark hair, once tangled and dirty from the crash, now fell in waves to her shoulders, threaded with traditional Ziridian light weaving that made it shimmer like captured starlight. But despite her royal bearing and otherworldly beauty, Naya's heart remained anchored to a memory, the gentle human soldier who had saved her life and shown her kindness when species loyalty should have demanded otherwise. Jake Morrison haunted her thoughts like a beautiful ghost, and no amount of royal duties or diplomatic functions could erase the warmth she felt when she remembered his kind eyes and protective embrace. Standing on the observation deck of Nexus Station, a neutral trading post floating in the void between human and Ziridian space, Naya adjusted the hooded cloak that concealed her identity. The station was a marvel of cooperative engineering, part human efficiency, part Ziridian artistry, where beings from dozens of species conducted business without the burden of war. It was also the only place in the galaxy where she could move freely without triggering interstellar incidents. "Your Highness," whispered Vera, her loyal attendant and the only person who knew about these secret visits. "Are you certain about this? If your mother discovers ... She won't," Naya said softly, though her voice carried steel beneath the silk. "And even if she does, some things are worth the risk." Through the transparent aluminum viewport, she could see the docking bay where Jake worked as a civilian contractor. After being discharged from military service, an honorable discharge that came with uncomfortable questions about his rescue of his Iridian princess, he'd found work, maintaining the station's hybrid systems. It was good work for someone who understood both human and alien technology, though Naya suspected he'd chosen it because it allowed him to remain in neutral space, away from the war that had defined too much of his life. She watched him now through the scope of her visual enhancer, her enhanced Zeridian sight picking out details that would be invisible to human eyes. He'd grown broader in the shoulders over the past 3 years, his body filling out from the lean soldier into the solid frame of a man who worked with his hands. His dark hair was longer now, often falling into his eyes as he concentrated on some delicate repair. Those same gentle brown eyes that had first convinced her to trust him still held that mixture of kindness and quiet strength that made her pulse quicken. "There," Vera pointed to a service corridor. "He's heading to Sector 7. If we take the maintenance lift ... Naya was already moving, her heart racing with anticipation and nerves. These meetings had become a monthly ritual, carefully planned encounters that appeared coincidental to any outside observer. A princess admiring the station's architecture, a maintenance worker going about his duties, a chance meeting in a corridor or observation lounge. They'd never spoken of the growing tension between them, never acknowledged the way conversations lingered longer than necessary, or how their eyes sought each other across crowded spaces. The maintenance lift was empty, its human-designed functionality softened by Zeridian bioluminescent panels that provided a gentle, living light. Naya caught her reflection in the polished metal walls and adjusted her cloak nervously. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a distinctly human expression she'd learned from cultural studies but had never understood until she met Jake. The doors opened onto a quieter section of the station, where the hum of machinery was softer and the corridors wider. She dismissed Vera with a gesture and walked alone toward the energy distribution center, her footsteps silent on the biometallic flooring. She found him exactly where she'd hoped, alone in the secondary power coupling bay, his upper body disappearing into an access panel as he worked on some intricate repair. The sight of him, so focused, so capable, sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Excuse me," she said softly, modulating her naturally musical voice to sound more casual. "I seem to be lost." Jake's head emerged from the panel, and when his eyes met hers, his face lit up with that wonderful smile that made her feel like the most important person in the universe. "Princess," he said, and the way he said it, not like a title, but like a treasured name, made her breath catch. "Fancy meeting you here? Just Naya, please." She moved closer, close enough to smell the clean scent of his soap mixed with the metallic tang of machinery. "And what are the odds?" "Astronomical," he agreed, closing the panel and giving her his full attention. "Though I have to say, the universe has excellent timing." They stood there for a moment, drinking in the sight of each other. 3 years had only intensified the connection she felt with him, transforming childhood gratitude into something deeper and infinitely more complicated. "How have you been?" she asked, genuinely concerned. "You look tired." Jake rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture she'd come to recognize as his tell when he was being less than completely honest. "Long shifts. The station's been busier lately, more refugees from the border conflicts. Everyone's trying to stay neutral, but neutrality takes a lot of maintenance." And you maintain the maintainers, she said with a slight smile. Something like that. His expression grew more serious. What about you? I heard about the attempt on your mother's life last month. When the news reached the station ... you were worried about me. It wasn't a question, and the warmth in her voice made it clear how much that meant to her. Of course I was worried. Intensity in his voice made her pulse race. Naya, if something happened to you ... He stopped himself, as if realizing he was about to cross a line they'd both been carefully avoiding. But the damage was done. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Jake, she whispered, taking another step closer. They were close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. I shouldn't, he said, but he didn't step away. This is insane. You're a princess. I'm a maintenance worker. You're Zeridian nobility. I'm human refuse. The war, the politics, the impossibility of it all ... Do you care? She interrupted. About any of that? I should care. Any rational person would care. His hand came up, almost touching her face, before dropping back to his side. But when I look at you, all I can think about is that scared little girl who trusted me to keep her safe, and how she grew up to be the most beautiful, intelligent, brave woman I've ever known. Naya's breath caught. Jake ... This is crazy, he continued, as if talking himself through a problem. Your people and mine are at war. If anyone found out, it would destroy you, your family, probably start another conflict. I can't be responsible for that. What if I don't care about the consequences? She reached up and touched his face, her fingers cool against his warm skin. What if the only thing that matters is this moment, right here, right now? Jake's eyes closed at her touch, and she could feel him trembling slightly. Naya, please don't ask me to choose between doing the right thing and wanting you, because wanting you is going to win every time. And don't choose, she whispered, moving closer until her forehead almost touched his. Just be here with me. For a heartbeat, they balanced on the edge of something that would change everything. Then Jake's resolve crumbled, and his hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. God help me, he breathed, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was everything she dreamed it would be, and nothing she could have prepared for. His lips were warm and soft, moving against hers with a gentleness that made her knees weak. She could taste the coffee he'd been drinking, could feel the slight tremor in his hands as they framed her face. Her enhanced Zeridian senses picked up the elevation in his heart rate, the way his breathing changed, the subtle shift in his bioelectric field that spoke of deep emotional response. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together as they tried to process what had just happened. This changes everything, Jake whispered. Good, Naya replied without hesitation. I was tired of pretending I didn't feel this way. Jake pulled back slightly, his hands still cupping her face. Naya, what are we doing? Where can this possibly go? I don't know, she admitted. But I know that I've spent 3 years thinking about you every day. I know that every diplomatic function, every royal duty, every moment of my life feels hollow without you in it. I know that when I'm with you, I'm not Princess Naya of the Zeridian Empire. I'm just me. And you see me, not my title or my species or my political value. I see you, he confirmed softly. And that's exactly the problem. Before she could ask what he meant, an alarm began sounding throughout the station. Not an emergency alarm, but the warning that indicated incoming ships. Jake immediately stepped away from her, his professional instincts taking over. That's the Zeridian frequency, he said, checking his scanner. Royal escort ships. Naya's blood went cold. They're not supposed to arrive until tomorrow. Then someone changed the schedule. Jake was already moving, checking his equipment and smoothing his hair back into place. You need to get back to your quarters. Now. Jake, wait. She caught his arm. What happens now? Between us? He looked at her with such tenderness that her heart broke a little. I don't know. But Naya, whatever happens, I need you to know. These last few minutes were worth whatever comes next. She wanted to argue, to demand they figure this out together, but the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor made the decision for them. Jake pressed a quick kiss to her forehead and disappeared into the maintenance access, leaving Naya to face whatever storm was coming. As she hurried back toward the diplomatic quarters, her mind raced with possibilities, fears, and the lingering warmth of Jake's kiss. The taste of him was still on her lips, the memory of his hands on her face still making her skin tingle. Whatever consequences awaited her, she couldn't bring herself to regret what had just happened. She loved him. The realization hit her with crystalline clarity as she walked through the station's corridors. She loved Jake Morrison, not just as the human who had saved her life, but as the man who saw her for who she truly was. The man who made her laugh, who challenged her assumptions, who treated her like an equal, despite the vast differences in their stations. The question now was what she was willing to sacrifice for that love, and whether love alone could bridge the impossible gap between their worlds. Behind her, in the maintenance bay, Jake leaned against the wall and tried to catch his breath. His lips still tingled from her kiss. His hands still remembered the silk of her skin. But beneath the joy and wonder was a growing certainty that everything was about to change, and not necessarily for the better. The war between their species was escalating. Political tensions were at an all-time high. And somewhere in the galaxy, forces were already moving that would test their newfound love in ways neither of them could imagine. But for now, in this moment, Jake allowed himself to smile and remember the taste of starlight on his lips. Queen Zephyra of the Zeridian Empire stood in the observation chamber of her flagship, the stellar harmony, her regal form silhouetted against the backdrop of swirling nebulae. At first glance, she appeared to be admiring the cosmic vista, but her true attention was focused on the holographic display floating. Before her, surveillance footage from Nexus, station showing her daughter in the arms of a human man. The Queen was a woman of extraordinary beauty, even by Zeridian standards. Her silver-blue skin held an almost luminous quality that spoke of ancient bloodlines and genetic perfection. Her hair, a deeper shade than Naya's, was woven with ceremonial crystals that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. But it was her eyes that truly marked her as royalty, ancient, knowing, and filled with the weight of ruling an empire that spanned dozens of star systems. Your Majesty, Admiral Thorne said carefully from behind her, his voice carrying the respectful tension of a man delivering news he wasn't sure his sovereign wanted to hear. The surveillance footage from Nexus Station has been verified. Princess Naya was indeed ... involved with the human maintenance worker. Zephyra's expression didn't change, though her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the crystalline railing. Jake Morrison, former human military, discharged after rescuing my daughter 3 years ago. Currently employed in technical maintenance on the neutral station. Yes, Your Majesty. Our intelligence suggests they've been meeting secretly for several months. The footage shows ... double quotes. He paused, clearly uncomfortable. Shows my daughter kissing him. Zephyra finished calmly. I have eyes, Admiral. Thorne shifted nervously. Your orders, Majesty? Shall we have the human removed? For a long moment, Zephyra was silent, studying the frozen image of her daughter's face in the hologram. Naya looked radiant in that moment, more alive and joyful than the Queen had seen her in years of court functions and diplomatic ceremonies. There was something in her daughter's expression that reminded Zephyra of her own youth, before duty and crown had calcified around her heart like beautiful, suffocating armor. No, she said finally. We will not remove him. Instead, we will invite him. Majesty? Thorn's confusion was evident. Zephira turned from the viewport, her movements fluid and decisive. Admiral, how long have we been at war with humanity? 17 years, Your Majesty, though tensions have existed for 17 years, she interrupted. 17 years of death, destruction, and stalemate. 17 years of watching our young people die for borders and pride. 17 years of my daughter growing up in a galaxy where half the sentient species are taught to fear and hate her simply for existing. She began to pace, her ceremonial robes flowing around her like liquid starlight. Tell me, Admiral, what do you know about human psychology? Thorn looked increasingly uncomfortable. They are aggressive, Your Majesty, unpredictable. Their emotions often override logic. They are passionate, Zephira corrected. They form deep emotional bonds that transcend logical boundaries. When they love completely. When they commit, they die for their commitments. She stopped, fixing him with her penetrating gaze. My daughter has chosen to love one of them. The question is, what does that mean for the future of our empire? Surely you don't mean to... I mean to meet this Jake Morrison myself, Zephira said firmly. If he is worthy of my daughter's affection, if he is truly the man who saved her life and captured her heart, then perhaps he is also the key to something far greater than a forbidden romance. The Admiral's eyes widened. Your Majesty, the political implications are exactly why this might work. Zephira moved to her command throne, settling into the bioform chair that molded itself to her body. Admiral, send word to Nexus Station. I wish to extend a formal invitation to Mr. Morrison to visit the Zeridian Imperial Court. As my daughter's guest, the court will be in uproar. The court will adapt, as it always does. Her voice carried the steel that had kept an empire stable for 2 decades. And Admiral? The invitation is not a request. 3 days later, Jake Morrison stood in the docking bay of Nexus Station, staring at the most beautiful spacecraft he'd ever seen. The Zeridian Royal Transport was less a ship than a work of art. Its biometallic hull seemed to breathe and shift in the light, while crystalline sections pulsed with soft bioluminescence. It was elegant, alien, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. You don't have to do this, Naya said beside him, though he could hear the hope in her voice that battled with her concern. My mother's invitations can be ... complex. Jake adjusted the collar of his finest civilian clothes, which, compared to the flowing fabrics and subtle luminescence of Zeridian fashion, made him look like he'd raided a supply closet. Your mother knows about us. She knows. Naya's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. But she could have had you arrested, or worse. Instead, she's invited you to court. That has to mean something. It means she wants to get a good look at the human who corrupted her daughter before she decides how to kill me, Jake said dryly. Naya squeezed his hand. My mother doesn't kill people. She's far more creative than that. That's not as reassuring as you think it is. They were interrupted by the appearance of a figure descending from the transport, tall, elegant, and unmistakably Zeridian nobility. The being approached with fluid grace, stopping precisely 3 meters away and offering a formal bow that managed to convey respect while maintaining clear hierarchical boundaries. Mr. Morrison, the figure said in accented but perfect standard. I am Lord Kellen, Her Majesty's personal aide. I am here to escort you to the Imperial Court. Jake had been expecting someone intimidating, but Lord Kellen surprised him. While clearly aristocratic, there was something approachable about him. Perhaps the way his formal bearing was tempered with what seemed like genuine curiosity rather than hostility. Lord Kellen, Jake replied, attempting his own bow and probably getting the angle wrong. I'm honored by Her Majesty's invitation. The honor is ours, Kellen replied smoothly. Any friend of Princess Naya is welcome at court. The way he said friend suggested He was well aware that the relationship went deeper than friendship, but he maintained diplomatic neutrality. As they boarded the transport, Jake was struck by the living quality of everything around him. The walls seemed to pulse gently with their own heartbeat. The floor was warm beneath his feet, and the air itself carried a faint luminescence. It was beautiful, but deeply alien, a reminder of just how far from his own world he was traveling. First time on a bioship? Naya asked, noticing his wide-eyed examination of their surroundings. First time knowing I was on one, Jake admitted. It's incredible. The whole thing is alive? Semi-sentient, Kellen explained as he guided them to what appeared to be a lounge area. The ship responds to our needs and emotions, maintains optimal environmental conditions, and can even make basic decisions in emergency situations. It's far more efficient than purely mechanical systems. Jake settled into a chair and immediately adjusted to his body temperature and posture. And probably a lot more comfortable. Comfort is important for long journeys, Naya said, settling beside him. The court is 3 days away at standard bioship cruising speed. 3 days. Jake tried not to think about what he might be walking into. Instead, he focused on the present moment, sitting beside the woman he loved, traveling through space in a living ship, about to meet an alien queen who held his fate in her hands. Tell me about your mother, he said to Naya. Really tell me. Not the official biography. Naya considered this carefully. She's brilliant, first of all. Probably the smartest person I've ever met. She thinks in layers. Every decision serves multiple purposes. Every action has consequences she's already considered. But she's not cold, despite what people think. She feels deeply. She just doesn't let those feelings override her judgment. Unlike her daughter? Jake asked with a slight smile. Unlike her daughter, Naya agreed, returning his smile. But I think she understands what it's like to love someone she shouldn't. My father wasn't the political match the court wanted for her. This was news to Jake. What happened to him? Naya's expression grew sad. He died when I was very young. A shuttle accident that many people believed wasn't an accident. After that, Mother never remarried, never allowed herself to be vulnerable again. The Empire became her only love. Jake processed this information, understanding dawning. So when she sees you with me, she sees herself at my age, choosing love over politics. Naya's hand found his again. The question is whether she's going to try to save me from making her mistakes, or help me learn from them. The journey passed more quickly than Jake had expected. Lord Kellen proved to be excellent company, sharing stories of court life and Zeridian culture that helped Jake understand the world he was entering. The ship itself was endlessly fascinating. He spent hours exploring its biomechanical systems with Naya, marveling at the seamless integration of technology and biology. But beneath the wonder and discovery was a growing tension. Every hour brought him closer to a meeting that could change everything: his relationship with Naya, the future of two species, perhaps even the course of the war itself. On the final day of their journey, Jake stood in the ship's observation lounge, watching the Zeridian homeworld grow larger in the viewport. Zarian was breathtakingly beautiful, a world of crystalline cities and bioluminescent forests, vast oceans that glowed with phosphorescent life, and mountain ranges that seemed to sing with harmonic resonance. Beautiful, isn't it? Naya said, joining him at the viewport. It's like nothing I've ever imagined. Jake put his arm around her, pulling her close. Your world is incredible. It's about to be your world, too, at least temporarily. She leaned against him, and he could feel some of her nervousness. Jake, whatever happens with my mother, I want you to know that these past few days have been some of the happiest of my life. Mine, too. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the subtle floral scent of her hair. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Together, she agreed. As the ship descended toward the royal spaceport, Jake caught his first glimpse of the imperial palace, a structure that defied conventional architecture, seeming to grow from the landscape itself like a living crystal formation. Spires twisted toward the sky, their surfaces reflecting and refracting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Gardens flowed between the buildings, filled with plants that glowed and sang, and moved in ways that had nothing to do with wind. "It's magnificent," he said honestly. "It's home," Naya replied. "And in a few minutes, you're going to meet the most powerful woman in the galaxy." The ship settled into its berth with barely a whisper of sound. As they prepared to disembark, Lord Kellen approached with final instructions. "Mr. Morrison, a few points of protocol. Address Her Majesty as Your Majesty, or Ma'am. Wait for her to offer her hand before attempting any physical contact. And most importantly, be yourself. Her Majesty values honesty above all other virtues." Jake nodded, trying to calm the butterflies in his stomach. "Be myself." "Got it. And remember," Naya added, squeezing his hand one last time before they had to separate for the formal arrival ceremony, "she already knows you're brave enough to save a princess and honorable enough to love her, despite the consequences." That's more than most people can say. The airlock opened, revealing a reception party that took Jake's breath away. A dozen Zeridian nobles stood in perfect formation, their ceremonial robes creating a rainbow of bioluminescent color. Guards in crystalline armor flanked the group, their weapons more artwork than armament, but no less deadly for their beauty. And at the center of it all stood Queen Zephyra. Jake had seen images of her before, but no hologram could capture the sheer presence of the woman. She was tall, taller than Naya, with the same elegant features, but refined by years of absolute authority. Her skin held a slightly deeper blue tint than her daughter's, and her eyes were not violet but silver, like captured starlight. She wore robes that seemed to be cut from the fabric of space itself. Dark material shot through with points of light that moved and swirled in slow patterns. But it was her expression that surprised him most. He'd expected coldness, calculation, perhaps hostility. Instead, her face showed nothing but curious interest, as if he were a particularly intriguing puzzle she was looking forward to solving. "Mr. Morrison," she said as he approached, her voice carrying the same musical quality as Naya's, but with undertones of command that spoke of absolute power. "Welcome to Zarian. I trust your journey was comfortable?" "Very much so, Your Majesty," Jake replied, managing his bow without falling over. "Thank you for your hospitality. Think nothing of it." She studied him for a long moment, and Jake had the distinctly uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing things about him that he didn't know himself. "You are younger than I expected. And taller." Naya's descriptions were incomplete. Jake risked a glance at Naya, who was standing with the other nobles, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes sparkling with what might have been amusement. "I hope not disappointingly so, Your Majesty." "On the contrary." Zephyra's lips curved in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "You are exactly what I hoped you would be. Come, Mr. Morrison, we have much to discuss. You and I suspect that before our conversations are finished, we will have changed the course of history." As she turned to lead the procession into the palace, Jake caught Naya's eye. She gave him an encouraging nod, but he could see the nervousness in her posture. Whatever Queen Zephyra had planned, it was bigger than a simple meeting between a mother and her daughter's boyfriend. Jake Morrison, former soldier turned maintenance worker, was about to become a player in a game whose rules he didn't understand, for stakes he couldn't imagine. But as he followed the queen of the Zeridian Empire into her crystal palace, one thing was crystal clear. His life would never be the same again.